Nearly 70% of tomatoes consumed in the U.S. come from Mexico.
And we get it through Texas, we get it through Canada, through the United States, and mainly a lot of the tomatoes, they come from Mexico.
The Trump administration announced a 17% tariff on fresh Mexican tomato.
In a dramatic shakeup, the Trump administration has torched a 30-year-old trade agreement that slapped a 17% tariff on fresh tomatoes from Mexico.
The border should be bustling at morning, with trucks moving, workers yelling commands, and crates full of villages' harvests. Food for millions is stalled in the heat when engines are cold and gates sealed. If they don't act, I'll lose 25 or 30% of this country's farmers. It must be done elsewhere. Canada left. Mexico has intervened in a trade conflict that threatens rural America's heartbeat. Land-dependent communities are being dragged under by each cargo. If one crop collapses, what happens when the rest do? And how far can it go? Find out. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency cited pesticide residues and quality issues in its cautious regulatory finding. The news appeared ordinary, like a government decision that rarely garners attention. An even more deliberate answer lay beneath that formal one. Safety regulations were not the only issue. By rearranging the market, North American agricultural dominance was deliberately shifted, blinding thousands of farmers. Trade graveyards appeared at border crossings within 2 days of the ban. Nearly 150 California tomato truckloads were stopped at the Peace Bridge. Their contents barred admission. Heaving Ambassador Bridge refrigeration units held 89 more shipments as produce lost value by the hour. The $340 million in exports revenue that supported 2,400 American farming families, mortgage payments, school budgets, local clinics, and rural communities' fragile economies was cut off, and those numbers were more important than government statistics. Timing exacerbated the blow. Only weeks before closing the border, Canada quietly signed $180 million agreements with greenhouse growers in British Columbia and Ontario to build fully funded and fast-tracked domestic facilities to replace almost exactly the volume of tomatoes they imported from California. The message was plain. American supply was no longer needed by Canadian buyers. Tom Richardson, who had farmed outside Fresno for over 30 years, put it painfully simply. The problem wasn't tomato quality. Problem was, Canada had already found its replacement. That was the first domino in what would become a far larger isolation of American agriculture. While California farmers were still grieving from Canada's unexpected pullout, the terrain 2,000 miles south was changing rapidly. Mexico took the chance to fill the vacuum and improve its global standing. No usual expansion occurred. With $12 billion in investment from European agricultural giants, quality, efficiency, and new long-term partners, Sinaloa, Sonora, and Baja California became production powerhouses overnight. Over $7 billion went to creating innovative greenhouse operations and hydroponic systems that could produce year-round output with 40% less water than traditional American farms. Additional $3 billion enhanced transport infrastructure, including new ports, highways, and storage facilities for international deliveries. Funding for people, universities, training centers, and research hubs across Mexico created a trained population and a torrent of innovation that would give it a competitive edge for decades. The rapidity of its impact shocked observers more than the amount of money. Mexico's partners used existing infrastructure and knowledge to alter agriculture in years or decades. Luxury Mexican tomatoes arrived in Europe within 8 months, undercutting American costs by 25%. University agriculture economist Maria Elena Vasquez Guadalajara described the move as strategic brilliance. As the U.S. lost confidence with global purchasers, Mexico offered itself as a stable, efficient, and cheaper option. European importers, annoyed by American delays and discrepancies, moved immediately. It showed how weak America's worldwide commercial dominance was. shockwaves extended beyond borders and international contracts. Small agricultural towns were hit hard by the tomato export slump. Driving through Watsonville, California, shows that the processing plant that formerly employed hundreds of workers is now dormant. Trucking companies that hauled fresh produce to Canada have trimmed their fleets to skeleton workers. Fertilizer suppliers, equipment repair shops, and even drivers' lunch spots are struggling. The ripple effect multiplies. Every dollar lost at the farm gate by roughly double that much in nearby areas, according to economists. Locals term it economic disaster in farming-dependent counties. Unemployment has risen over 30% since the recession. Not blaming farmers. This is the current system. This is a U.S. food production system. For the first time in a generation, food manufacturing facilities operate at half capacity. Many of the nation's most fertile regions are losing population as families move to other areas. The cost goes beyond money. Delano School Superintendent Janet Morrison has experienced droughts and market slumps, but nothing like this. Each family that has attended the school for generations leaves, reducing enrollment and financing. Tax revenues fall, leading districts to cancel programs and consider consolidations. Rural hospitals are already stretched. As patient numbers drop and unpaid bills grow, farming region property values have plummeted by about a fifth in 6 months, plunging entire villages into a negative spiral. It started with tomatoes, but has become a worldwide chess battle. Now, food is more than a commodity. It has become a strategic tool, national security pillar, and alliance reshaper. Due to its dependency on Russian energy, the European Union learned the dangers of overdependence when Mexico offered a reliable agricultural partner when American supply collapsed. European investors recognized more than a financial agreement. They saw resilience, variety, and security. Brussels analysts bluntly stated that America dominated agriculture by being consistent, efficient, and trustworthy. As such traits were questioned, alternatives grew appealing, and Mexico was ready to intervene. When capital infrastructure and timing align, trust and trade ties change swiftly. Canada rejected more than pesticide standards, a planned move to decrease dependence on an untrustworthy relationship. Mexico's collaborations went beyond tomato production. They reorganized decades-old agricultural supply chains. The bigger issue is scale. If America can lose ground so quickly in tomatoes, what happens when similar trends emerge in wheat, soybeans, or corn? Crops that feed the globe and anchor economies. The precedents and weaknesses are evident. The gap has grown due to technology. The new Mexican facilities are larger than the U.S. ones. They're smart. Greenhouses with real-time plant and soil sensors are replacing fields. Using weather and demand projections, automated systems control water, light, and fertilizers. Harvests can be scheduled more precisely than in traditional farming. The efficiency improvements are astonishing. A ton of tomatoes requires almost 3,000 gallons of water for American growers. Through automation, Mexico's innovative hydroponic systems do the same with less than 2,000 labor expenses. Forecasting program matches planting to peak market. Windows and controlled settings shield American farmers from crop losses that may ruin seasons. American universities and research institutes formerly dominated agricultural innovation, but chronic underfunding and complex approval processes have hindered development to creep. In contrast, European and Chinese companies have introduced their most advanced systems directly to Mexico's fields. A growing technology disparity makes American agriculture look outdated. Dr. Patricia Williams, who worked on agricultural technology development in California before moving to Europe, expressed her frustration. Breakthroughs exist, but bureaucracy and outdated systems prevent rapid adoption across the border. These breakthroughs are already reshaping production. Mexican growth is driven by talent, investment, and innovation that formerly powered American leadership. Even beyond production, the The crisis shows the fragility of America's distribution networks, processing plants, trucking fleets, and rail lines, which were built when global demand for our produce seemed guaranteed, but are now too large for shrinking markets, raising per-unit costs and making exports less competitive. Cross-border trucking companies have seen business drop by almost 60%, and rail systems constructed for huge agricultural loads are under capacity, and maintenance costs are rising. Always attentive to consumer demand, supermarkets change quietly. Formerly displaying California vegetables, stores now sell Mexican. Retailers want stable, economical, continuous supply, which is already available south of the border. Pressure from consumers who want consistent quality at competitive rates is speeding the change for regional grocery cooperatives. Additionally, American tomato farmers are seeing how fragile decades of market links can be when a single choice changes an industry's future. Families relied on cross-border commerce, borrowing, and crop sales for generations. Almost overnight, that certainty dropped. The purpose of agricultural finance was predictability. Banks anticipated stable markets when lending, and farmers relied on those cycles to operate. After Canada closed, the assumptions vanished. Federal Reserve's Agriculture Loan Survey demonstrates damage's depth. Loan delinquencies in tomato-producing regions have increased 78% since the Canadian import prohibition. Banking institutions that once regarded farming loans safe now require collateral many families cannot provide. In the last 8 months, farming county bankruptcy filings rose 45%. Even those numbers mask the truth, as smaller farmers that cannot afford bankruptcy are quietly abandoning their land, leaving behind family legacies. Washington's response emptied the crisis. 6 months after Canada's ban, the Agriculture Department still conducted impact assessments and held conversations instead of proposing answers. Weather calamities, not trade interruptions, are covered by crop insurance. Markets that disappear don't qualify for flood or drought emergency assistance. When there is no buyer for the produce, federal subsidies are pointless. Congress descended into finger-pointing while trade representatives said the crisis was temporary, but offered no date or solution. Mexican and Canadian competitors took advantage of America's inertia by acting quickly while the U.S. waited. Mexico's agricultural ministry accelerated European investment initiatives to build efficient, sustainable greenhouses. Each month of Washington's deadlock delays border recovery. Every Mexican and Canadian investment strengthens their edge, while each foreign technical advance widens the gap America must close. Will American farmers recover, or is this the start of a permanent decline? If tomatoes can cause this catastrophe, what happens when other sectors follow? Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.